Constance stood on the ramparts. She leaned over the parapet, watching as a young fox approached along the dusty road, bearing a stick with a white rag of truce tied to it. The big badger was uneasy. She knew this one, a fox from old Sella's brood. You need eyes in the back of your head to watch that lot. "Stop right there and state your business, fox," Constance called gruffly. Chickenhound sniggered, but seeing the badger's stern expression, he quickly took control of himself. "I want to see your abbot," he called. The reply was abrupt. "Well, you can't." The fox waved his flag, squinting up at Constance. "But I must see the abbot. I come in peace. I have important information for sale." The badger was unmoved. "I don't care if you've got the rumbling foxtrot. You aren't getting inside this abbey. If you want to speak to anyone, then speak to me." Constance watched the crestfallen fox, then added as an afterthought, "And if you don't like it, well, you can sling your brush back up the road." Chickenhound was dismayed. This last insult had taken the wind completely out of his sails. He tried to think how Sella would have handled a situation like this. Eventually, he unrolled the bark scroll and waved it up at Constance. "This message is for your abbot's eyes only. It's important." The badger eyed him coldly. "Then chuck it up here. I'll see that he gets it." No amount of wheedling and blandishment would cause the cynical badger to change her mind. She was adamant. In the end, Chickenhound had to throw the scroll up. He made several puny attempts, each one weaker than the last. As the scroll fell back down into the road yet again, Constance called aloud, "Put some energy into it, you little milksop. I'm not hanging about here all day." Chickenhound heaved the scroll with all his strength. He was gratified to see Constance lean out and catch it. Hopefully, he called, "I'll wait right here for an answer." The badger grunted non-committally. She sat down below the parapet, out of sight of the fox, and scanned the message. Constance stayed where she was until a reasonable time elapsed, then stood up, panting heavily for effect. "Tell Sella that the abbot will see her 2 days from tonight at 10 o'clock in Mossflower Wood. She must come to the old tree stump, and mind you tell her no tricks." Chickenhound waved the flag. He went into a bout of uncontrollable sniggering. "Right, I've got the message, fat one. Be sure your abbot brings lots of valuables with him. Goodbye, old grayback." Constance poked an angry snout down at the insulting young fox. "You'd better get running, frog-face. I'm coming down there to put my paw behind you right now." Again, Constance dropped behind the parapet. She hammered her paws loudly against the stones. Standing up, she watched the terrified Chickenhound racing off down the road in a cloud of dust. "Snotty-nosed little upstart," she muttered. There was no need for the Father Abbot to concern himself with the underhand dealings of traitor foxes. Constance would be well able to deal with the situation herself. Matthias was famished. He sat down and took his lunch with Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel, the Vole family, Silent Sam, and Basil, the garrulous hare. The young mouse ate mechanically. He did not really want conversation. This latest discovery of a new and baffling rhyme concerning moonlight, the north, and an unknown threshold nagged at his brain. Methuselah had gone off to seek the solitude of his gatehouse study, where he claimed he could think more clearly. Matthias was not the liveliest of table companions. He smiled and nodded, paying little attention to the chatter of the voles and squirrels. He was not even distracted by Silent Sam, who sat upon his knee, stroking his whiskers with a sticky paw. Basil Staghair eyed the food which Matthias had hardly touched. "Beg your pardon, young mouse, old chap, but if you can't finish that blackberry muffin or that red currant tart..." Matthias absently pushed his plate across to the hare. Basil needed no second bidding. Abbot Mortimer entered. Seeing the look on Matthias's face, he He leaned across and murmured in his ear, "All work and no play makes Matthias a dull mouse. Cheer up, my son." "What? Sorry, Father Abbot. I didn't mean to be rude. I was trying to solve a problem, you see." The abbot patted Matthias indulgently. "I understand, my son. Methuselah has told me some of the difficulties facing you both. My advice is, don't let it get on top of you. Relax a little. Time provides all the answers. You've done splendidly so far, Matthias. Meanwhile, you must not forget your manners at table with guests of our abbey." Matthias snapped out of his reverie. Silent Sam was admiring his sword belt. He laughed. "Do you like that, Sam? It's the sword belt of a famous warrior." The little squirrel leaped upon the table. He darted up and down, thrusting out his paw as if he held a sword in it, stabbing away at thin air. He pointed at Matthias. The young mouse gave him a hug. "No, bless you, Sam. I haven't got a sword of my own yet, but I will have some day." Silent Sam pointed to himself, cocking his head on one side. Matthias prodded his fat little stomach. "A sword for you too, Sam? Well, I don't know about that. Your mom and dad might not want you going about armed to the teeth." Basil Staghair had the answer. He produced a beautifully made knife. It was very small, encased in a cunningly crafted willow bark sheath. The hare beckoned Sam. "Come here, you dreadful little rogue. I've got the very thing for you. This is a leveret dagger. All young hares carry one. Here, let's try it on you for size, young buccaneer, what? Basil picked up a worn and discarded sandal. He undid the footstrap, threading the dagger in sheath along the strap. He fastened it around Sam's waist. "There, by the left, you look like a regular little swashbuckler now," chuckled the kindly hare. Bounding up and down with delight, Silent Sam cut a comical figure as he fenced his way along the tabletop, thrusting and parrying at cruets and candlesticks with his new sword, and sucking fiercely on his free paw. Matthias joined in the laughter as Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel thanked Basil for the generous gift to their tiny offspring. Forgetting his immediate problems, Matthias passed a happy hour in the company of the friendly woodlanders. He enjoyed it even more when Cornflower appeared. She shared Matthias's seat, glad to be off her feet for a while. Basil nudged Matthias. "Excellent little filly, that girl. Do you know, she can produce more tuck in the twinkling of an eye than you could shake a stick at. You mark my words, young feller, my mouse. A body would be lucky to settle down with her. I say, have you noticed the way she looks at you? Hinds look at stags like that. Noble creatures, stags. It strikes me that you could be just the stag for her. Why, I remember when I was only a young Lance Jack." Cornflower was making such faces that Matthias was about to silence Basil when Methuselah popped in at the door. He beckoned urgently to Matthias. Hastily, the young mouse excused himself and left. Basil leaned closer to Cornflower. He smiled roguishly. "You didn't know I was a Lance Jack, did you, my dear? Ah, those were the days of the 47th Hare Border Rangers. That was the first time I ever clapped eyes on a stag. I say, I'm not boring you, am I? Nods as good as a wink to old bachelor Basil, you know." Methuselah was in a ferment of eagerness as he led his young friend over to the gatehouse. "Matthias, I've found out where the threshold is." The ancient mouse refused to say more until they were safely inside his gatehouse study, with the door firmly shut. Even then he said nothing that made any real sense, shoving Matthias to one side as he delved through old parchments and manuscripts, scattering books left and right. "Where is it? I had it not 5 minutes ago. Hullo, what's this? Oh, the treatises on Beefolk of Redwall." Methuselah hurled the dusty volume to one side, narrowly missing his companion. "Wait a tick. I think I may have put it down over there." Matthias gazed in bewilderment at the over-cluttered study. Books, scrolls, and manuscripts littered the small room. In his excitement, Methuselah opened a desk and practically disappeared under an avalanche of paperwork. "Hey, steady on, old mouse. What are you up to?" cried Matthias. Methuselah emerged jubilant, clutching a yellowed book. "Eureka, this is it, Sister Germain's literal translation of Martin the Warrior's Abbey blueprints." He flicked swiftly through the dusty pages of the aged volume. "Let's see. Gardens, cloisters, bell towers. Ah, here it is, the Great Wall and its gates." The old mouse winked at Matthias gleefully as he adjusted his glasses. "Listen to this. On the west wall will be situated a main gate so that creatures may come and go, obtaining entrance to or exit from the Abbey of Redwall. This entrance will be guarded both day and night, for it is the main gatehouse, and as such is the very threshold of our abbey." The two mice hugged each other. They danced around amid the chaos of paper, chanting with joy. "The gatehouse is the threshold. The gatehouse is the threshold." The abbot, who was passing by, heard the noise. He shook his head at Ambrose Spike, who was coming from the opposite direction. "Mayhaps they have been at the October ale a little too much, Father Abbot," said the hedgehog. The abbot chuckled at the idea. "Well, if it helps them on their mission of discovery, Ambrose, perhaps they ought to drink some more, eh?" "Aye," Ambrose agreed. "'Tis enough to inspire any creature, good October ale. Perhaps it might inspire you one day to make me keeper of the cellar keys, Father." Inside the gatehouse study, the two companions were once more at work, trying to break the code of the Great Hall rhyme. "Well, that's another piece of the puzzle in place," said Methuselah, "but we've jumped ahead of ourselves a bit. Look, there are 4 lines before that to crack yet. Look for the sword in moonlight streaming forth at night when day's first hour reflects the north." Matthias interrupted. "Those first 2 lines sound as if they could only be solved in the darkness. Look for the sword in moonlight streaming forth." "I agree," replied Methuselah, "but the next line is of vital importance. It tells exactly when to look. At night, when day's first hour." Matthias mused. "Let's look at this logically, go through it word by word." Slowly they repeated the line together. "At night, when day's first hour." Methuselah slumped in his armchair. "I'm afraid it doesn't mean anything to me." "Wait," cried Matthias. "Midnight is the last hour of the old day. So, by the same token, 1 o'clock in the morning is the first hour of the new day. But we still tend to class it as nighttime. It is, as the rhyme says, at night when day's first hour." "I believe you are right," said the old mouse. "Day's first hour is not when it becomes light. It's 1 in the morning, still dark." Matthias leaned wearily against a stack of books. "But if the gatehouse is the threshold, where are we supposed to stand to see anything an hour after midnight?" "That's easy," grinned Methuselah. "The rhyme says, 'From o'er the threshold seek and you will see.' It's simple. What is above our heads right now?" Matthias shrugged. "The wall, I suppose." Methuselah banged his paw down on the armchair. "Exactly. And where is the only place you can stand on a wall but on top of it?" Suddenly it became clear to Matthias. "Oh, I see," he cried. "From o'er the threshold means that we must stand on the wall directly above the gatehouse." As fast as they could run, both mice hurried up the steps to the top of the wall. With Matthias in the lead, they pounded along the ramparts. Matthias stopped above the gatehouse and stamped his foot upon the stones. "I'd say about here. Would you agree?" Methuselah looked a trifle doubtful. "It looks to be a very rough approximation." Matthias had to concede. He looked sheepishly about. The stones where they stood were no different from any other part of the wall. The trail seemed to have gone cold again. Dejectedly, Matthias sat down on a heap of rock and rubble that had been there since the invasion. What are we supposed to do now?" Hang about up here until after midnight and wait for a miracle? The old gatehouse keeper raised an admonitory paw. Patience, young one, patience. Let us take stock and review the facts. Lend me your knife for a moment. Matthias drew Shadow's dagger from his belt and gave it to his friend. He sat watching as the old mouse began writing in the dust from the rubble. Item 1. Martin is Matthias. Item 2. We have found Martin's tomb. Item 3. We have also found his shield and sword belt. Item 4. Our task is to find Martin's sword. Item 5. Where? From here, the top of the gatehouse wall. Item 6. When? At 1 in the morning, when moonlight streams forth. Item 7. In which direction? To the north. They sat in silence, digested the facts on the list. Then Matthias spoke. Suppose we look to the north. Both mice turned their heads northwards. Well, what do you see, young one? Queried Methuselah. Matthias's voice was tinged with disapprovement. Only the abbey, part of the beehives, the north side of this wall, and the treetops beyond. What do your eyes see, old one? Exactly the same as yours do, but perhaps a bit dimmer. Don't give up hope, though. Let us keep looking. Maybe we'll see something. The surveillance continued. Apart from retrieving his dagger, Matthias sat very still, peering northwards. Eventually he had to give up. His eyes were beginning to water, and he was getting a crick in his neck. Methuselah had fallen asleep in the afternoon sun. Angrily, Matthias slammed his dagger point deep into the edge of the rubble heap. I told you it was a waste of time. Can't you stay awake for 5 minutes? Must you go on sleeping on me? The old mouse awoke with a start. What's that? Oh, Matthias, there you are. Dear me, I must have dropped off for a moment. Sorry, it won't happen again. Matthias was not listening. He was digging in the rubble with his dagger. Methuselah watched him curiously. What in the name of goodness are you up to now? The rubble scattered as Matthias dug away madly. I think I've found what we are after. There's some sort of shape in the stone down there. Trouble is, there's too much rubbish on top of it. I think we need Formal's help again. Formal and his team arrived panting. With Matthias running ahead, the moles collapsed on the rubble, breathing hard. You're only gotten bitty short legs. Us moles do oi takes it. You ma gentle mice needin' our help again. This time Matthias understood. Yes, please, Mr. Formal. Do you think that you and your team could possibly move this pile of rock and rubble? There's something we need to get at underneath it all. Formal spread his stubby paws wide. He smiled winningly. No soon as said and done, young'un. Where you like 'em lookin' or shiffin' to? Matthias shrugged. Oh, anywhere, I suppose, as long as it's not in our way. Formal spat on his paws and rubbed them together. All right, mateys, best dumpin' this lot where it could comin' from. The two mice had to jump aside smartly as the mole team took over. With much hurrying and ahhing, they waded busily on, bulldozing the enormous heap of rock and rubble off the top of the ramparts. It tipped downwards in earthy showers, back into the trench in the abbey grounds whence it had first come. Matthias watched admiringly. What splendid workers these moles are, Methuselah. As the hail dwindled, his friend heartily agreed. Indeed they are. Their skills and knowledge are passed on through families, you know. Earth, rock, shale, or root, they can handle it all. Do you know, it was the moles that dug the foundations for this very abbey. Formal can claim direct descendant from the moles who was in charge of the operation. In fact, it was Martin who bestowed the title Formal upon his ancestor. As the mice conversed, the moles hurled the last of the rubble from the ramparts, then set about brushing the stones clean. Formal tugged his nose in salute. Har, we am done now, sirs. All bid ye good day. 10 seconds later, they were all gone. Moles aren't too fond of heights, observed Methuselah. Right, let's see what they've discovered. It was a circle cut into the stone. On one side it was cut shallow, while the opposite side was carved deeply. The center was domed with 2 slots graven into either slope. At the apex of the dome was the letter M. Beneath it were carved 13 small circles, each with a smiling face upon it. Constance came rambling along the wall, checking on the road beneath. "Hello there, you two. Are you staying up here all day? You'll miss afternoon tea if you don't hurry. There'll be Precious left with 3 squirrels, 3 voles, and Basil Staghair as guests." Studying the carvings, Matthias waved absently at the badger. "You carry on, Constance. We'll be down shortly." The badger's natural curiosity was aroused. She came over and stood between the 2 mice. After a cursory glance, she threw up her paws in mock despair. "Oh no, not more puzzles and riddles." Methuselah gave her a severe stare over the top of his glasses. "My dear Constance, kindly do not pour scorn on things you know nothing of. Leave it to those with specialized knowledge." Turning to Matthias, the old mouse continued, "Yes, most interesting. These 13 small circles with smiling faces. What do you make of them?" Matthias could only shake his head. He could not think what the circles might mean. Constance interrupted. "What, do you mean those things? They're obviously the 13 full moons of the year." Methuselah was distinctly piqued. "How do you know that? Explain yourself." Constance scoffed. Any badger worth its salt knows all about the moon. Do you want me to recite all its phases? I can, you know." Matthias was suddenly back on the track again. He counted along the moons, stopping at the 6th one. "That will be this month, June. When is the full moon due in June, Constance?" "It's tomorrow night," came the prompt reply. "Well, is something supposed to happen then? Some magic or a miracle?" Methuselah ignored the badger's attempt at levity. "If we stand up here at 1 o'clock in the morning on the night of the full moon, we may be able to find the sword of Martin the warrior," he said, rather sternly. Constance scratched her muzzle. "How are you going to manage that?" Matthias ran his foot around the edge of the circle. "We're not quite sure yet, but we're trying to figure it out. You see, it's all linked closely with the rhyme from the wall of Great Hall, Martin's tomb and the stuff we found in it. This sword belt, a shield, and another rhyme on the back of a—" Constance interrupted. "What type of shield?" "Oh, pretty much the standard kind used by warriors," Matthias replied. "A round steel affair with hand and arm holds." The badger nodded knowingly and continued, where Matthias had left off. "Yes, I've seen that sort of thing before. Not much to look at. In fact, just the type of shield that would fit precisely into this circle. Can you see the slots for the arm holds? Well then, if you look at that carved circle, you'll notice that it is cut so that the shield would tilt, probably to reflect the moonlight." Both mice stared at the badger. There was awe and respect written upon their faces. Matthias shook her paw with great ceremony. "Constance, wonderful badger, old friend, don't worry about afternoon tea. You just sit yourself down right there, because I, personally, am going to bring you the largest, most delicious tea that has ever been served within the halls of this abbey." The warm red sandstone ramparts rang to the echo of the 3 friends' delighted laughter.